Alright, so let's go over some of the wiring that I'm going to do. This is an old, like, where you can get it for like a sandrail, dune buggy, whatever. It's just a gauge box. I'm going to mount it right up front, up top. Drill a couple holes to the top, mount it to the top of the cage. But it's kind of nice because it already has some holes pre-drilled. And then I have it's got one of these cheap, these little round guys. This is a hour and meter and a tachometer combo. So obviously that'll take up one of the holes. It's got like a little built-in battery for backup, I guess. And then it's always handy to know what the voltage is. Check the system out. So just got a analog Bosch one cheap. That'll fill up the other hole. And then I got one of these cheap, they're like these little fuse block panels you can get. And this will mount inside. It has like a bunch of fuses and such. So this will be the fuse panel. Then I'll mount it inside the box. And then that'll be the main distribution for everything. So that'll be easy. Then I got couple toggle switches and where is it? And then a momentary switch right here for the starter. And then another one for the light. So we'll have a few things on. So really the voltmeter, the tachometer, a light just so you can see, and then obviously on this one, since I'm going to reuse the existing tank, I have an electric fuel pump. I got one of these newer low pressure fuel pumps that they claim. It's only supposed to be like a couple PSI, so it's about the same as atmosphere, so it should work just fine. So we'll rig this guy here up as well, be able to wire it in to our system, and that way I can recycle the existing fuel tank. And I may have to put a reducer, but we'll check the fuel pressure with an external gauge and make sure it's only a couple PSI so we don't overflood the engine or anything by putting too much pressure into it. And I have one of those restrictor style pressure regulators I used on the old engine that I can move over, but if I don't have to use one, I'd rather not use one. So that's going to be kind of the wiring up here for the dash that we'll go through. Alright, so on this particular little fuse panel that I picked up, little cheapy Amazon one, you'll notice it has a positive lug over here and a negative lug. And the negative lug has a minus here and a minus here, so all these down here are all common, and they get tied into this guy, which is really handy for when you're wiring inside like a little dash panel like that. You don't have to try and squeeze a whole bunch of wires into one. And then the positive just comes to one side of the fuse here, and then it goes to the whichever one up here, so they're separate up there. So that's pretty handy, so we can just tie in our main hot and our main ground, going back to tie everything together. You can kind of see here with the meter, because I've had some of these before and they didn't separate it out like this, but if I click on the negative side, then we'll click check positive and kind of see on the meter there's no continuity. Then come over here, it's always the way. Motherfucker. Stay. And then you can see there, so you got continuity like that. And then we kind of do the same thing up here. This guy, we got continuity because we have a fuse in there. But you can check any of these other ones and there's nothing. So that'll make life quite a bit more simpler inside there when we wire up the inside of the fuse box. Alright, so this is kind of a mock-up. I moved switches and stuff around to see what's going to line up kind of best where, and then the fuse panel, you're going to see here, will mount right back here. It's kind of a tight fit, but I can still get the cover off. I'll mount it right about there by putting this guy here, because I can even bend these pins up a little bit if I need to get a little bit extra clearance versus these studs on the voltmeter. So I think that'll work just fine right there. So now it's mocked up. I'm going to go ahead and mount this guy, mount the fuse panel. All right. So now I got the fuse box mounted. I'm going to have the wires, the main harness come through here, which with this guy, it has this lid that pops down real easy. So I'm just going to kind of see how it kind of lines up like that. So I just need to make a hole through here, and that's got like a regular electrical stress release that I can use. I'm just going to drill a hole and use this, and then that'll hold my protect the wires going through here and hold them in place. So let's knock that out real quick. There we go. That's good now. Let's take the wrapper off. Grab our little stress reliever. There we go. That'll work. Oh yeah, in case you're wondering, this is a 7/8 hole saw, and this is a 1/2 inch knockout stress reliever, so it fits perfect. I'm just going to mount like so. It'll fit pretty well centered right in front. I'm going to mount it to the very top. So I'm going to do is now I want to mock it up over there, make sure got a couple spots, and I'm just going to make a couple studs in here so I don't have to take it, and then just have a nut on top of the cage, so if I ever got to work on it, I can just loosen those and drop it down. The original one had bolts that went all the way through to the bottom, and that was a real pain because you had to dodge the wires when you refed the bolts through. So if I just use a couple studs, it'll avoid all that. All right, so I just took the dash, put it into the cage a little bit, put a couple marks through the top, and I'm just going to drill a couple 1/4-inch holes for mounting. Okay, so that should be, shake it all out. A couple 1/4-inch bolts here. Actually, this might be 5/16. Yep, looks like they're actually 5/16. So let's go one more hole size. Make sure to blow everything out good when I'm done. Perfect. Now let's take the box back apart. Okay, now I'm just going to make, let's say just using my bolt here, come through on the top side, put one of those, and then a nut. And we got this mounted through there, like so. And then I'll push these up through the roof. I'll mark exactly where they go, push them through the roof. And then this is kind of stud-like now. I can just put a washer, that was the roof, and then another nut to lock it so I don't have to, and then I can drop the whole dash real easy without having to open it up. All right, so we're over here, the Bobcat, here's the lid. So what I'm doing is putting the top of the dash. It's gonna go right here. That works out pretty good, so I got these existing holes or penetrations right there. Okay, so I'm just gonna mount inside here. I got these old shock bolts or washers, so I can just drop one of those on there like so, and then I'll put the other one on there, and then I have a nice mount, and I can tweak the position a little bit if I need to, and it'll make it real easy to drop down. Okay, so I got some some wire that I've had from another project here. It's a little overkill for this. It's 12-3 shielded, but it'll work just fine. So it's got 2 black, but there's numbers written on them. So we have a 1, which I'll use for hot. So let's just label that real quick. So I use that for hot, and then I'll just use the green for ground. So that's kind of your normal ground for AC at least. And then this other wire here, it's got number 2. I'm going to use that one for the fuel pump. So I'm just going to put some white on it just to make it real obvious, and I'll use white for fuel pump for later on. And I'll write this down so I don't forget. Okay, now it's time. So the red's going to go over here on this side instead, or it's going to go to a switch actually. So I'm going to have one switch here, so my hot feed coming in is going to connect to one switch, and then that'll be my off-on switch to power everything up in the dash, and then from the switch it'll go to the bus bar. So let's just kind of start doing it in logical order. Okay, so we'll add on our little ring terminal here. A little bit better belly shot. Now at least you can see that. This is the part I'd fast forward through because it's boring. Okay. Okay, now I know those aren't going to come loose. Good and strong. So now, might as well connect up our switch. So that'll be the process. We'll connect up our switch, and then let's repeat that. All right, so I hooked up positive to one side of the switch. I made a little jumper here. So let's hook it on up to the positive on our bus bar, or fuse panel. And it's got a big plus, so it makes it pretty obvious. And looks like my fitting's a little too small to fit over that stud. So that sucks. Alright, so I couldn't find any other ones. I found these guys here. They're uninsulated that'll fit. So let's do the same thing. Little shrink tubing that we'll use on these. Okay, now we're going to heat shrink it. Alright, so now let's go ahead and hook up. So we're going to take our positive, hook it up to our fuse panel positive lug. Okay, that one's good. So now we'll hook up our ground. I just kind of want to get these stiff wires out of the way first. Okay, now it'll be a little bit easier, so those are in there, to mount my switch. Alright, so I've got the switch here. I'm going to use this hole. I'm just going to use one metal washer, even though the hole's too big. If I use metal washer, and that's going to be these little plastic guys, and then it makes it flush. And then I can put my little on-off. It's got a little slot. We'll go there. And then I can grab my little waterproof protective nut cover, and should be able to screw this down and snug her up. You know, it kind of covers up the on a little bit, but it kind of turn a little bit. So let's try to line up. And there we go. They got a little on-off. This will be on to power up everything inside the dash panel. That's what that one's going to be for. Alright, so next up, I'm going to wire up. This one I labeled as white, and this one's going to go down and feed the fuel pump and the ignition coil. So I'm just going to use this upper hole right here. Get another little toggle switch out. And then I'll just, doesn't matter if I use the top or the bottom, so on this one I'll just use the bottom. Okay, now I need to make a little, we'll pop in this hole here, and then I'll need to make a jumper wire to go over to the positive bus. Alright, so I just made a simple little jumper wire from here. So hook them up to the switch. Probably can't see this very good. Okay, then I'll just look for so I kind of get him positioned here. Move my wires around a little bit. And then I got plenty of options. So any along this front down here, which you can't see, this front one down here, these are all positive. So I'm just going to grab one of these. Alright, so now we're doing the same thing with the momentary push button switch. That's all this guy is. So I got one wire that's going to leave the dash, and then this wire over here is going to go over to the fuse block. Just thread them in there. Good and tight. Now I'll do the same thing. I'll just find another open spot here and I'll connect them. There we go. So that's all connected. Now let's grab a fuse. Pop in. Those are little 5-amp fuses. Should be plenty since it's just powering a solenoid. It's not like it's the actual starter current going through this little switch. The switch could take it, but the wiring won't be able to. Alright, so next we're going to do the hour meter and tachometer combo. And on this particular one, it's got like a different number letters on the back. It says like F2, and the little chart says that F2 is for a single cylinder 4-stroke. So hook the jumper up there, and then this one's going to go to ground. It came with a positive one that'll obviously go to the positive, and then the one over here is labeled S. It's for the signal, and then it came with some wire for that too, and then that'll end up wrapping around the spark plug wire like 6 times or something like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and mount it up, and then we'll trim the wires to fit. So I know I'm not going to need super long. I'm going to be going like right around here in the ground. I'm just going to go ahead and trim this guy to make it easier. Pop her in, and it has this weird little squeeze thing here so that you can attach it. This kind of like snaps on as you push it on. Not the strongest, for sure. And there it is. It's mounted. It's actually not too bad. It's got like a rubber, so it seems to be pretty good little connection. Let's go ahead and hook up our ground. Alright, so that guy's mounted now. Got all the cable, got positive, negative, and our signal wire running out the side here. So that's good to go. Alright, so next step is we're going to mount our voltmeter. So this one's actually pretty simple. So it's labeled on the red here. So positive is over here, negative is over here. And it came with an assortment of nuts and bolts, or washers and nuts and such. So I'll open this up and use these. Okay, so got the two nuts tightened down, so we can see how that looks. It doesn't look too bad. A little bit smaller than the other guy. But it looks like my bracket slipped. I didn't realize that, so I'm gonna have to loosen it and redo it. All right, so I fixed my little mounting stud. It's kind of hard to see, but it had slipped off and went in the hole beside it. There's not a whole lot of gap, but now it's mounted and looks good. All right, so now that's wired up. You can kind of see with the positive and negative going over. So now I just need to put a fuse in so it'll work. And now we're down to one more switch for the lights. Okay, so now I'm out of the switch over here. This will be the light switch. As you can see, I got one wire coming from here to my positive. And then for the light, for the voltmeter, it's just one of these little old incandescent bulb styles. So I'm going to hook him up here, and then I made another jumper wire that I'll connect up here, and this will be the positive for the headlight. And I went ahead and ran also another one off the negative bar for the light, because I'd rather go ahead and ground the light directly to here so I get a better ground. Even though I could probably go with chassis ground, but if I do it this way, I know everything will have a perfect ground. I don't have to worry about anything. So let's connect that real quick. So that pretty well takes care of all the wiring on the inside. Now we got to start routing them through to the outside through the lid. So let's do that. So one issue I just noticed, this isn't big enough to put all the wires through. It'll take this guy only. We'll fill it all the way up. So I'm just going to put another knockout right over here, kind of beside this one for the other wires. All right, so here we are after putting another one in. So now it kind of naturally is going to want to, my existing big wire here, so I'll turn it a little bit so you can see. It lines up better with this one, so I'm going to feed him through here. I just grabbed a piece of insulation off of that one, and I'm going to stick it through here, so it'll kind of clamp on there to help protect. So now comes the fun part, and that's going to be getting everything through. Okay, so when I was doing this, I had to fold this over a little bit on this end, you can see, because I put my knockout, I was trying to keep distance between them, but it was a little too close, so I just had to fold it over a tiny bit, as you can see there. And then that allows everything to clear after doing that. All right, so finally it's all tightened down. The dash is ready from that aspect. So now we just got to put some plugs on this end so that we can easily make it so if we ever got to take the cab off or whatever, you can just disconnect a few plugs and take the whole thing right off and not have to worry about it. Or if you got to do maintenance on it, we can just disconnect here, drop it down, take it apart on a bench versus the usual trying to squeeze inside the cab and work on it.